Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to this episode of Capping the Card, where I go through Saturday's card at Belmont at the Big A and give you my top pick and my top value play for all 12 races on the card. Now, before we get into the good stuff, want to make sure to remind everybody to like and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube channel. We have a lot of great content, whether it's race previews, like I have with Gino Picola this week, where we talk about the 4 graded stakes races taking place out at Santa Anita, including the California Crown, as well as full card analyses like this one. We also have handicapping and betting tutorials, and we are going to have a ton of Breeders' Cup coverage coming up for you starting next week. So we are going to have a ton of this to get you ready for Del Mar and the Breeders' Cup. But on top of that, don't worry, we're going to have Keeneland stuff as well. So a lot of great content here on NYRA Bets YouTube. So make sure to like and subscribe. Well, like I said, the point of this exercise is to go through all 12 races. I'm going to give you my top pick. I'm going to give you my top value play. I'm going to talk a little bit about betting strategy and some of my logic behind why I like or dislike different runners throughout Saturday's card. I hope you enjoy it. A couple of things to note about Saturday. One, the weather. Going to have a little bit of rain potentially Friday, Saturday. Nothing that's too overwhelming by any stretch of the imagination. Scattered showers, I think probably most of, at most on those 2 days. Nothing that's going to be overwhelmingly consistent over several hours or anything like that. I don't anticipate the turf condition in terms of being on or off turf will necessarily change. I don't anticipate a sloppy sealed track, but maybe the track is good and maybe the turf course is good rather than fast and firm. Just something to keep in mind. Like I said, we'll have to adjust as we get closer. Didn't really impact my handicapping because I'm not expecting like a super wet track or a super yielding turf course. So as a result, like I said, I kind of assumed it was going to be pretty close to fast and firm, even like I said, if it's good and good, perhaps on the main track and the turf. The other thing to keep in mind, a little bit of a different jockey colony this week. You got Flavian Pratt out in California. You got Johnny Velasquez out in California. What does that mean? It means a couple of jockeys are getting some bigger shots on some bigger horses. I think somebody who's going to be a big beneficiary throughout the day, somebody like Manny Franco, I think is suddenly going to pick up a lot of top horses on his rides throughout the day. I think obviously Irad Ortiz Jr., always dangerous when some of the other big names leave town, but it does give the opportunity for some maybe lesser used jockeys to have some opportunities on some nicer horses, and something to certainly keep in mind as we get into the card. Well, listen, let's dive into it, and let's talk about first race, which is a $90,000 maiden special weight. And we're on the turf to start things out, going a mile and a 16th. And more importantly, on the inner turf. Why do I bring that up? Because the inner turf has been playing a little bit better to closers over the first 2 weeks. It's going to be interesting to see how that trend continues. The outer turf course seems to be playing a lot better to speed. Now, that could change over time, but for now, that's kind of been an interesting trend. Where am I going as my top selection? Going to a horse, number 4, Hands of Time, trained by Christophe Clement. Now, on one hand, Clement is 1 for 26 during this Belmont at Aqueduct meet. That is not good, okay? 4%. He's a 20% trainer normally. However, he is 15 for 26 in the money. In other words, his horses are running well. They're just not quite getting home. When you see that sort of thing, it tends to normalize over time. Those second and third place finishes turn into first place finishes. And especially for a barn like Clement, that's a high percentage barn. Hands of Time, third start in his career. And this one has not done anything to embarrass himself, certainly in the first couple of times out. Finished behind a horse without caution in debut. That horse we're going to talk about a little bit later in the card in a stakes race, actually. And then last time out, finished beyond Papiamento and Thunder Roll, who's also in this race. Papiamento is a pretty nice horse. Actually, now that I think of it, I think Papiamento was a value play on a cap in the card I did a couple weeks ago when I was up in Saratoga. In any event, no time to pat yourself on the back because it's about picking winners today, not 3 weeks ago. So this horse, though, I think can sit the right type of trip. You know, had a little bit of a tough trip last time out under Joel Rosario. Listen, I like everybody else. I saw the ride Rosario gave in the John Hettinger to Silver Skillet. It was certainly less than ideal. He still does have that brilliance, though, and he still is one of the better turf riders you're going to find. And so I think that this horse can sit more of a mid-pack trip, which really fits what Joel typically likes to do. It's going to be more on the inside, saving ground. And then, especially the 2-year-olds, you typically are going to be able to find some seams coming for home. So I think Joel's going to be able to give this horse a pretty good ride there. I'm not really overwhelmed by Chad Brown's horse in this one, Aviator Gee. Maybe this horse really perks up on the turf. The workout over the turf up in Saratoga didn't really indicate that to me. Did finish well behind Sandman and Innovator in debut up at Saratoga on the dirt. Now, those two horses are certainly well intended, but fell a little flat the next time out. So, not overwhelmed there. Battle Drum for Todd Pletcher, one that, again, not overwhelmed by that horse in debut. I thought didn't really had kind of the perfect trip and still wasn't able to make up a ton of ground in that particular race. And Thunder Roll, I think, is an interesting horse. The number 5 4-trainer Bill Mott, who is ice cold right now, we should say. Mott over the last month in New York, and I got to give a shout out to my friend Sarah El Badwi for this stat. She put me onto it. Mott over the last month, 1 for 32 in New York with a 26-cent ROI. And unlike Clement, during this Belmont and Aqueduct meet, he's 0 for 15 and only 3 for 15 even hitting the board. So his horses just are not firing right now. Thunder Roll should get out up on the front end, and we have seen horses steal these races up front with this jockey colony. But I do wonder, maybe this horse just is kind of destined to be that kind of second, third place finisher for a little while until he finds the right spot. My value play in this one, the number 8 Dragoneer for trainer Danny Gargan. And I really like this horse in that this is one who didn't have a little bit of had a little bit of trouble in that debut up at Saratoga, and then really closed like a rocket ship under Kendrick Carmouche that day. Got up for third, but was dead last really after about the 6 furlong mark. So was really making up a ton of ground late. I think this one, sired by McKinsey, pretty expensive purchase as well. 5-1. I'll be honest. I feel like this horse could get lost on the board a little bit. I feel like a horse like Aviator Gee, because of the connections, feel like even Battle Drum, because Irad Ortiz Jr.'s up, Hands of Time, Thunder Roll. I feel like those 4 horses might take a little bit more money. Dragoneer on the outside might just float up. And oh, by the way, Kendrick Carmouche, I might not think of him as a turf rider. He's won a couple turf races, though, already, and he's winning 26% of his mounts this meet. So something to keep in mind. And he exits with the highest buyer speed figure in the field. That's not nothing. So some thoughts there on race 1. Well, let's hit to race number 2, which is a $50,000 maiden optional claimer. You don't see a lot of those in New York. You see those usually more down in Gulfstream Park. But this one's interesting. I certainly could understand why everybody would just go to the number 9, Man of Mischief, for Kenny McPeak. The horse finished second in the 2 times it ran on dirt. It was interesting to me, though, that McPeak was running this horse against state-bred competition. Then, went long on the turf after 2 perfectly respectable efforts on the dirt, goes long on the turf, now comes back, gets out of state competition, and runs against restricted competition. And with regards to sales price, I don't know, it feels like a little bit of a step down. And now we're going back to sprinting on the dirt. Maybe it was just about finding the right sort of race for this horse. But I'm going to take a little bit of a shot against this one. This horse will probably still be included on my tickets. But in terms of my top pick, I ended up on the number 7, America's Honor, at 8-1. This horse getting the blinkers on for trainer Greg Sacco, and that is a plus move for him. Over the last year, 25% winners with a 24 race sample size, so 6 for 24 with a $3.04 ROI. So definitely a plus move there. This horse gives itself too much to do, plain and simple, and was running behind some better horses last time out. But I think this one has some ability. You get the blinkers on. Nick Juarez coming up from Monmouth for the day to ride this one. I just think this one has a little bit of interest with the equipment change. You really want to be forward on this track. You want to be up on the lead in these sprints. I think the blinkers help him do that. I think you get this horse forward, and he has some talent. I like this one at a big price. Now, for my value play, part of me just wants to give this woman a wonderful shout out, and that is Adrienne DeVoe. You know her sister, Cherie DeVoe, but Adrienne is sending out Shoot the Nickel for the first of her runners and barn. This is her first starter as a trainer. She's been an assistant to Cherie for quite some time, but this is going to be her first starter, and I wanted to give her a little bit of a shout out there. Really great horse person, wonderful person to be around, and she loves Jack Russell Terriers. Come on, how do you not love that? She's got Katie Davis up on the mount. And I'll be honest, I setting aside the kind of sentimentality, I think this one's interesting. This horse debuted in the Tremont Stakes for trainer Chad Summers, and sired by Violence, that's usually a pretty precocious sire. And I know the sales price only $50,000. This one has been firing off bullets, though, for Adrian leading up to this race, 47-4, as well as a 101 5 furlong gate work. That was the first of 25 just last week up here at Belmont. So I think this one, debuted in a big race, had a little bit of trouble in that race, packed it in early, not surprising for a young horse. Now we come back. Adrian's got this horse pointed in the right direction, 6-1. I know it's a little bit of a lower price than my top pick, but I think this one could provide a little bit of value, and also want to wish Adrian all the best with her first horse she's sending out on her own. Let's go to race number 3 on the card, which is a 7 furlong claimer for $35,000 for 3-year-old nut fillies and mares. And this one, it feels like a pretty wide open race to me. And I ultimately landed on a horse taking a pretty significant class drop, and that is the number 5 Progeny for trainer George Weaver with Irad Ortiz Jr. up on the mount. Listen, I'm not foolish. When you don't have Flavian Pratt and Johnny Velasquez around, Irad Ortiz Jr. is going to get a lot of wins on the day. And this is the first of a few that I have him getting. And I think that's just something to keep in mind. Like I said, I think Manny Franco is going to benefit a lot from this, but I think this is one where Irad could really get healthy and get a nice win. But this is one that's been running against some very solid competition for Weaver, even on the turf as well. Finn ran 4th in the Boiling Springs 2-back at Monmouth Park. But this one also, like I said, has some good speed. Not elite speed necessarily, but has shown the ability to get out and be at least tactically positioned early in a race. And I think the 7 furlongs is going to work well for this horse. I think, not going a mile is probably a bridge too far, but I think 6 furlongs might be a little short. So I think 7 furlongs is going to work well. This one's firing off a 48 flat bullet work, first of 69 last week out at Saratoga. So I think this one for George and Irad makes a little bit of sense in this race with a pretty significant class drop. I get people are going to probably look to the couple entry, the number 1 Belle of the Ball for trainer Linda Rice with Jose Lizcano up in the mount. Linda is winning some obscene percentage of these sort of class droppers. But it's interesting. This horse won at a maiden claiming 40 and at a starter allowance 50. And this horse is absolutely good enough to win this race. But the last couple of times actually has been regressing and getting a little bit worse. And I'm just curious about that. Progeny, as the last effort wasn't great, but that was also over a good turf course. So maybe didn't like that condition. And before that, like I said, I thought ran perfectly fine in the Boiling Springs. And interestingly enough, also broke its maiden in a maiden claiming 40. So ultimately Progeny, my top choice here. Where did I go for my value play? The number 6 Book of Wisdom, a big price. And that's the one thing I'll say about this race. I think the coupled entry is tough. I think a horse like the number 9 Backstretch Rose for Gary Contessa certainly looks legitimate. Won at a lower level claiming race last time out. And Progeny, like I said, I think looks tough too. But, you get past those 3, this race feels pretty wide open. So where might you catch a price underneath? I do think Book of Wisdom for Wayne Potts with Christopher Elliott up on the mount. Stuart Elliott's son already got a win up here during the Belmont meet up at Saratoga, or up at New York, I should say, actually coming off a racing triple at Parks the other day. So he's riding well. This horse taking a class drop in some ways, coming down from Allowance Company at Finger Lakes. But this horse, you look 3 back, ran, I thought, a perfectly good second against Claiming Company at Belmont at the Big A meet back in the spring before we went up to Saratoga. And then, like I said, went and won a second level allowance race up at Finger Lakes. So this horse knows how to win and runs very honest every time out, has run well down here at Belmont, and is not just a Finger Lakes type of horse. I know sometimes people will go against Finger Lake shippers and things like that, but this one's not a bad horse. And like I said, I think it's probably at the right level here in this kind of claiming 35. I think that kind of fits where he's going to be able to do his best. Do I have this horse up top? Absolutely not. More of a horse to consider underneath. Does get the 7-pound weight allowance as well with Elliott up there as the apprentice. So something else to keep in mind. Well, let's head to the first of our 4 graded stakes races on the card, and that is the Grade 2 Woodward going 1.125 miles on the dirt. And for this one, listen, it is a short field because the number 5, K Army, who was supposed to be coming up from Chile, well, he's up here, but trainer Belmont said he's not quite ready yet. So he's going to be scratching. It is only a 4-horse field, which is why you see my value play is 5-2. My top choice in this one is Skippy Longstocking. And you're not going to get much of a price here. 4-5 on the morning line for Saffie Joseph Jr., Manny Franco up on the mount. Quite frankly, there's just no other speed in this race. I mean, that's the issue, is that you look at Skippy and he's going to have the inside rail, and Manny is as good as anybody at getting horses out and up front early. And then you look, Krupe is a deep closer. Tapit Trice can sit a tracking trip, but has never been quick out of the gate exactly. And then Mask Parade is a bit of a deep closer and doesn't have a good early turn of foot. So Skippy Longstocking is just going to be cruising up front on his own. I think that's as easy as it gets. And you know something, even if there's a little bit of moisture in the track, that's not an issue. He's won his last 3 Grade 2 races. That's kind of where he fits, this Grade 2, Grade 3 level. I don't think he's a Grade 1 horse, but I think he can run well in these Grade 2, Grade 3s, and that's exactly what Saffie's got him in. Now, in terms of a value play, if anybody's going to beat him, I actually think it's going to be Tapit Trice, because I think he's the horse that's going to probably be sitting second in this 4-horse field with Dylan Davis up on the mount. I do think it's interesting that Irad Ortiz Jr., who rode both Tapit Trice and Krupe last time out, opted to go with Krupe. Now, Krupe's a very nice horse. Finished second in the Whitney, second in the Brooklyn to Next, second, won the Suburban, I should say, 2-back. And then, I thought was running well, finished third in the Pegasus World Cup. He's a horse that's really come into his own. He's over $1 million winner now. He's a multiple-time stakes winner. So, he's a nice horse, but I'm really surprised that Irad chose to go to Krupe. This allows Dylan Davis, who's continued to ride well since the end of Saratoga when he's come downstate now. And I know this horse is coming off of 4th in that Jockey Club Gold Cup, 2 Highland Falls and Pyrenees and Disarm, and kind of came up a little empty that day. I felt like he also, if you notice, he took a ton of kickback that day, and turning for home, I mean, his whole body was just covered in mud. So I wonder, maybe smaller field, get this horse kind of on the outside, a tracking trip behind Skippy Longstocking. I think he's going to give a much better effort, reminiscent to what he did at the Monmouth Cup 2-back, where he really showed a lot of class coming off that long layoff. So I think he's been training well for Todd. If you're going to find value, if you're going to try to beat Skippy, I think Tapit Trice is the horse to do it with. All right, well, let's head to race number 5 on the card, which is a $45,000 optional claimer going 1 mile on the main track. And let's talk about a couple of horses in this race. And I really like the number 4 Neural Network in this one. I'm going against Bourbon Chase, who is your favorite. Why am I going against Bourbon Chase? Listen, 2 for 15 with 8 second-place finishes. I just can't. At a short price, I just cannot get behind a horse that has that type of career record. Now, he's getting the blinkers put on. But, and there's always a but, this horse had blinkers earlier in his career, and it didn't help. In fact, his 2 wins came without blinkers. So, now putting the blinkers on, I understand the reasoning behind it in terms of this horse needs to just be able to focus, not maybe run with horses, learn to run past them or hold them off. But I can't with this horse. Second back from a long layoff, ran well last time out, losing to Silver Satin by less than a length. Would it shock me if this horse won? Absolutely not. But again, at a short price, that's just not the type of horse I can get behind. Number 4 Neural Network, though, Manny Franco aboard for Chad Brown. This horse ran really big last time out, going up against Cut the Cord, and went off favored, ultimately finished second that day, had a little bit of trouble early in that race. I think has, better speed than what the Timeform US pace projection shows. This horse had some nice efforts last year, actually technically won the Gander, actually, when Maker's Candy was disqualified and ended up getting put up. So Neural Network actually won that race, then finished third in the Woodhaven, then went to the bench for well over a year, for close to 15 months, came back on the turf, then eventually ran last time out, finishing second by a nose. I think this horse can get the job done. Manny's going to get this horse out up there on the front end. I think 1 mile is the perfect distance for this one. So that's where I'm going to be looking as my top selection of 3-1. Now, in terms of a value play, I thought a little bit about the number 6 Engineer Empire for Clement, But one of the things I've noticed about this horse, 4 career starts, 2 wins. When did both of those wins happen? Second start. First start, debut start was no good. First start off a long layoff was no good. This horse is coming off a long layoff. We're moving on to the next horse. So where am I ultimately going to go for my value play in this one? I like the number 2 Mighty Atlas for Mike Maker with Ricardo Santana Jr. up on the mount. I think this one got a little tired last time out going a mile and an eighth. I think a mile is going to be a little bit of a better trip for this one, and also flashed a lot better early speed with Ricardo up on the mount for the first time. So I think Ricardo getting in the irons makes a big difference. I like when Ricardo's aggressive. He's had a nice little Belmont at the Big A meet. He's actually 4 for 12, limited sample size, but he's doing real well getting those winners up here. So that's one at 6-1 on the morning line for Maker that like I said, I'm intrigued by. I think that this horse might have a nice race in him and also has some nice races to run back to as well. Tends to look to do his best work at a mile, 5 for 9 in the exacta at the distance with 3 wins. So that's where I'm going for my value play. Now let's go to the Turf Classic, the grade 1. And the Joe Hirsch, and this one is going 1.5 miles on the turf. And, folks, this one is a tough one because on paper, there is pace. But on paper, a lot of races in New York should have pace. So you have a horse like Farbridge on the outside who probably is going to want to go. Joel Rosario was aboard last time, and he sent that horse to the front end and absolutely stole it in the Sword Dancer, was able to carve out glacial fractions, going 117 to the 6 furlong mark and being able to win gate to wire over a very good field that included Measured Time and Silver Knot. You also have the number 1 horse in this race, Get Smokin', 12-1 for Mark Casse. This horse has very good early speed and actually usually goes a little bit shorter. I'd expect this horse, particularly from the inside rail, Fernando de la Cruz aboard, to ascend as well. Now, the other horse that I landed on is Emmanuel. And Emmanuel is a horse that is 10-1 on the morning line, presents outstanding value in my opinion. It's getting the blinkers put on. That means he should be a little bit more forward and a little bit more focused. He does tend to be, and he can be a little bit of a one-paced runner. So I think the blinkers are not just about early speed, but about maybe getting him just in a better position. The best way to make sure that a horse doesn't have to worry about passing other horses, put him on the lead. You get Manny Franco up on the mount. This is Mike Maker's second start with this horse. Had been in Todd Pletcher's barn. Now Maker gets this horse. Maker stretching horses out on the turf. Stop me if you've heard that before. This is a horse that ran pretty well in the United Nations, actually, 2 back, going 1 mile and 3/8. Finished 4th that day and was making up a lot of ground late. So I think that one, even though it had some trouble in that race, showed a really good effort. Came back, finished 5th at Kentucky Downs. Not everybody's built for that type of a track. But like I said, the blinkers on now for Maker, Manny Franco aboard. I just think this one has a lot to like at a 10-1 price. If Manny can get this horse sitting maybe just off the pace of the number 1, Get Smokin', and as a result, Farbridge is really going to get hung potentially wide, I think, in this race, or is going to have to take back and sit a little further back if he wants to try to get that rail trip, which he likes to do. Now, listen, if I'm getting out a 10-1 horse in a 7-horse field, there's not much else in terms of value. So I do think Emmanuel is kind of the value play in this race as well. Maybe you want to just include him underneath. Understandable. If you like Warlike Goddess here, I get it. I think she might have lost a little bit off of her fastball over the years. She's 7 years old now. That said, she's still really freaking good. I mean, yeah, that first start off the bench was a 3rd place finish against Didia and Nisi Marie in that New York. Then she comes back and goes down to Delaware Park, gets the job done over Chop Chop and Vergara. And then last time out in the Flower Bowl, that was an example of idea generation and Florent Giroux just stealing it on the front end when they were allowed to go 118-1 to the 6 furlong mark. And nobody was even close to that horse, which was just an outrageous, just absolute malpractice by the rest of the jockey colony, in my opinion. Like I said, though, Mott pretty cold at this point. And it's just something to keep in mind. Like I said, I think she might have lost a little off the fastball. Silver Knot gets Dylan Davis aboard because Flavian Pratt is out in California riding National Treasure, among others. So that's interesting to see. I do think that horse could bounce back. But one of the things I'll say about Silver Knot, look at the efforts in the grade 1s. Not quite the same. And then look at those wins that he racked up earlier this year in the Elkhorn, the Man o' War, and the Bowling Green. It's not exactly a murderer's row of horses that he beat. Then last time he steps up, he goes against Farbridge, Measured Time, not quite as good. I wonder if he's a horse that maybe we overestimated, maybe ran really, really well against some lesser fields that didn't have the ability to really challenge him. Going to be interesting. I think he's going to set the right type of trip with Dylan and with Charlie Appleby, always dangerous with his runners. But like I said, going to take a shot with Emmanuel in this one, throw it downfield a little bit, see if we can catch a price. Let's head to race number 7 on the card, which is a $50,000 maiden optional claimer for 2-year-old fillies going 6 furlongs on the dirt. And listen, I'm not going to fade my man, Irad Ortiz Jr. too many times. And that is the case here with my top selection, number 6, Melly Mel for Melanie Giddings and Irad Ortiz Jr. This one ran pretty well, all things considered, over a sloppy sealed track in an off-the-turf race. Finished 4th that day, chased really the whole way. Now it's dropping in class a little bit. Listen, I'm always willing to forgive a horse's debut effort, particularly when it's over a wet track. And now you're going from getting Sean Bridgebowen, no disrespect, to Irad Ortiz Jr. That's a pretty significant jockey upgrade. This horse fired off a 46-4 bullet, going 4 furlongs up in Saratoga back in the beginning of September, and it was first of 22 that day, came back with another nice work after that. Now, has not worked since that September 8th date, so maybe that's something to be a little bit alarmed by, not having that recent work. But I think this one for Flying P Stables, we remember Flying P had that big summer up in Saratoga. I think they could also have a nice one here. Certainly one to keep in mind. I think Irad gets this horse out maybe a little bit more aggressively, gets this horse in a bit more of a forward position. I think that's where you kind of have to be on this track. Certainly you could look at a horse like maybe Carol Said No at 8-1 for Tom Morley, another one that likes to get out there on the front end. Stepping up a little bit, though, going up against maiden optional claimings up here in New York after losing to maiden claimers down at Monmouth Park. My value play, the number 7, Frankie Hiccup, 6-1. The blinkers are going on. Like I said, you need to have speed on this track. 92% of winners. 92. That's a big number. 92% of winners in dirt sprints have been on or within 3 lengths of the lead at the 3/8 or half-mile mark. You got to be close, folks. You cannot close. Senior Buscador ain't coming here and still winning any races with that sort of track stat. So where am I going? Like I said, Frankie Hiccups for a value play. The blinkers on. This horse is going to show better speed. You got Romero Morrow up on the mount for Rudy Rodriguez. I know Rudy's traditionally not very good at second starts. I mean, absolutely flat out abysmal with second starts. Only 1 for 57 actually over the last year. But I think this horse is coming out of a very good race. The top 2 horses in that maiden race went on to win stakes races next time out. So went up against some serious competition, had a really wide trip that day, broke from the rail as well. So some things that I like, escaping the rail, you're getting the blinkers added, you're getting a little bit of class relief. I think this one at 6-1 makes a lot of sense. So that's going to be my value play in race number 7. Let's go to race number 8 on the card. And this is a $75,000 maiden special weight for 2-year-old fillies bred in New York, 6 furlongs on the outer turf course. And where am I going in this one? Well, listen, I took a long look at George Weaver's horse, the Vacoma, who was $330,000 at sale. I just don't see it in the works. The works are just not overwhelming. I don't really love the dam side pedigree for the turf. And also, it's not just that I don't like the dam side pedigree, which is mostly dirt. It's also look at the lack of precocity from the dam side pedigree. The dam took 2 starts and finally won on her 3rd start. The second dam took 4 starts and finally won on her 5th start after getting dropped down significantly in class. So when I see the lack of precocity out of the dams in the family, that's always a little bit concerning. Now, I know Vacoma's been a great influence as a sire in terms of first out success, but that means the horse will probably get bet down a fair amount. So I don't love that one. In my opinion, it came down to whether or not I was going to go with number 11, Vehamente for Joe Sharp. Blinkers are going on with Irad Ortiz Jr. up on the mount. Or if I like the number 9, Fire Agate for Christophe Clement with Dylan Davis up on the mount. Ultimately, I landed on Fire Agate. I'm going to have both of those horses, though, on my tickets. So by no stretch am I fading Vehamente that much. I just ultimately went to a horse that I think might be a little bit of a better price because of the connections. Not this time. Always a great influence, not only first out, but also on the turf. Looking sharp underneath. Solid dam side pedigree. We already talked about Clement being close, but not quite getting there with some of his horses. This one's just been training very consistently leading up to this race. I think at 5-1 presents actually nice value as a top selection. If you wanted to go with Vehemente for Joe Sharp, would not argue with that at all. Coming out of that same race that I mentioned earlier, where you had two horses coming back to win in stakes competition next time out. So I think that Vehemente with the blinkers on the far outside, Irad up. Listen, there's a lot of things to like about that horse. I'm including this one on my tickets, but ultimately, like I said, Fire Agate, my top choice. Where am I going as a value play? I'm throw it downfield a little bit here. I like Run Don't Walk at 10-1 for trainer Rob Atras and Kendrick Carmouche. This one's got a couple of nice works leading up to the debut. Maximum Mischief, I like as a sire generally. Kind of a nice mid-tier sire, I think, for first out starters. Kendrick will give this horse an honest ride. And Atras is pretty good, actually, first time out. Over the last year, 21%, and he's 24% with his 2-year-olds over the last year. So, he's a guy who knows how to get horses ready out of the box at 10-1. Maybe you don't like this horse up top, but I think even underneath, this horse has some interesting intrigue and potential there to go with. So that's where I'm going to round out my value play in race number 8. Now let's go to race number 9, which is the Vosburgh. And this is a grade 3 going 7 furlongs on the dirt. And listen, I got to give a shout out to my good friend, Andrew Champagne. Lord Miles is running. I love Andrew. I love that he loved Lord Miles at 59-1 when he won the Wood Memorial last year. It feels like ages ago, but just last year with Paco Lopez aboard. That ain't happening though this time. Lord Miles, admittedly coming off a nice effort 2-back in a $75,000 handicap at Gulfstream Park, but was thoroughly dominated in the Charlestown Classic against grade 2 competition going 1 1/8 miles. Granted, that's about 8 turns in Charlestown. I kid, it's only 3 turns. But Eric Cancel up on the mount for Lord Miles. Needed to give that horse a shout out, but Andrew, I love you, but I think that horse has 0 chance. So where am I going as my value play? I'm going to the number 6, Mufasa, for Ignacio Correas IV. And this one draws Irad Ortiz Jr. up on the mount. This horse is coming off a very impressive effort last time out at Colonial, going 7 furlongs, 99 buyer speed figure. I know it was with Lasix against optional claiming competition, but also went up against Repo Rocks. And all Repo Rocks did was come back to win next time out and looked really good doing it. And so won an allowance and then ran second in the Parks Dirt Mile as well to Coastal Mission. So, beat a pretty nice horse there and a graded stakes winner in Repo Rocks. Again, willing to draw a line through that first effort at Churchill Downs. That was the first start in over 6 months and just kind of needed one. Quite frankly, off the bench, I think last time you saw how good this horse can be. Now you're picking up Irad, sired by Practical Joke, Dams by Scat Daddy. A lot to like here with Mufasa. I think it's at 3-1. I'm going to play against, a horse like Baby Yoda. That pains my father, I'm sure. But I'm also going to play against Comedy Town for Safi Joseph Jr., who's your morning line favorite, actually, at 5-2. And I think that's a horse that I just kind of need to see that horse come up here to New York and run a big race. I wonder sometimes how much of sometimes these horses are byproducts of South Florida and their form doesn't always travel up to New York. In terms of the value play, there wasn't a big double-digit price that I liked in this race. And I wonder what value you're going to end up getting on the number 2, Scotland. He's 7-2, so it's not much of a value play. This horse has some nice races. Obviously won the Curlin last year over Il Miracolo and Blazing Sevens, though Blazing Sevens, gosh, what a shell of a horse we saw today actually just run up here in Belmont at the Big A. But I digress. This horse coming off a win against $80,000 optional claiming company up in Saratoga in July has been working out for Mott. Again, Mott has been ice cold over the last month or so up here in New York. So take that for what it's worth. This horse has been working out nicely, though, leading up to this race. There's talent. This horse clearly has the talent to win this type of a race. 7-2. I'll be interested to see what price you end up getting on this one, but I just really could not get to a horse like the number 1, 7-11. Like I said, I'm kind of out on Baby Yoda, who I think is a little bit of a one-figure horse with that True North and is also a byproduct of Saratoga. Dean Delivers is a nice horse, but again, kind of want to see that form come up here and do well in up north. And then Lord Miles, like I said, I couldn't get there. So Not a lot of other value options in this race. And so Scotland, like I said, is 7-2. Not much of a value play, but it's kind of the best value I thought that might be out there as an alternative to my favorite and my top pick, Mufasa. Now let's move to race number 10 on the card, a $62,000 optional claimer for 3-year-olds and up, going a mile and 16th on the inner turf course. And where did I go in my top choice? Well, I'm going to a couple of prices here. And again, I just was not overwhelmed by the favorites in this spot. And I say that a horse like Irish Prophet at 6-1 is a little bit interesting for Neil Drysdale if this horse comes out from California, though I typically fade West Coast horses coming east. Tidal Forces for Fernando Abreu with Irad up on the mount. A perfectly good horse. Hasn't really won much lately on the turf. 2 for 12 on the turf, maybe a little bit better on the synthetic actually, and going against some lower level competition. The number 3 BUs, I can't with this horse. Much like Bourbon Chase, I just can't. 3 for 17 with 5 seconds. The horse finishes underneath, but hasn't won since Kentucky Downs back last September. So, just runs well, has good numbers, but again, at a short price, just can't really get there. I do think a horse like the number 1 Create Trouble at 6-1 is a little bit interesting for Rob Atras. A horse kind of perked up a little bit on the turf for the first time. First time with the Atras barn was with Brittany Russell and Brendan Walsh before that. So maybe that horse could surprise. But like I said, ultimately I went to Freedom Trail for John Terranova. Why? A couple of reasons. One, this horse started off its career gangbusters. The horse won in debut and then went and won the Awad Stakes 2 years ago in 2022. And so this horse was a stakes winner, second career start, goes to the Kentucky Jockey Club, actually runs against like Instant Coffee and some of those horses that we saw on the Derby Trail 2 years ago. Tries the dirt, doesn't, take to it, goes back to the turf, runs in some graded stakes races, was even stakes placed in the Kent Stakes at Delaware Park over a soft turf course that day. And eventually kind of got back, ran second, a really close second in a $62,000 optional claimer back last year. But the horse had another long layoff from November until August, came back, ran ninth, and the exact type of race you would expect this horse to run off of a long layoff, which is the horse really didn't show much, and the horse clearly needed a race off the bench. Terranova put this horse through some drills after that, though. This horse fired off 2 consecutive bullet works and was first of 5 going 5 furlongs in 1 minute and 2. And then the one that really caught my eye, September 16th, shout out to my dad, that's his birthday, 46-4 on the turf, first to 16 that day. This horse is getting cranked up. And so I think this horse is going to show a little bit maybe better early gate speed. But even if he doesn't, this horse just feels like he's gotten better conditioning now, 8-1. I'm going to take a little bit of a shot there with my top pick, and a horse that has some class to him and has run some pretty big races. Even if he goes and runs that race 3 back against 62 optional claimers here, that's good enough to win. Absolutely. So that's my top pick. Where am I going to go for my value play? I'm going to go to the outside, and I'm going to go to another 8-1 runner, and that's Wonderful Justice for trainer Joe Sharp. This one was in the Brad Cox barn and is much the same profile. A horse that started off its career with a win in a maiden company and then immediately went and won a stakes race, winning the Black Gold down at Fairgrounds. Ran in the Transylvania, the J.W. Murphy, and, then nearly won against Optional Claiming Company. I mean, it's really interesting to see how similar these two horses are. Sharp now takes over. If you remember, Sharp had a really strong Saratoga meet. Now 0 for 5, but limited sample size up here at Belmont at the Big A. Joel Rosario up on the mount. This horse has good early speed. If Joel is aggressive with this horse, especially breaking from the far outside post, I could see this Joel trying to get this horse up on the front end. And I think it could be an interesting development to try to get this horse out up front. And I just think this horse, again, has some races to run back to. And I'm not really overwhelmed with anybody else in this field. So going to take a little bit of a shot with 2 8-1 runners who I think can provide a little bit of value. Now let's go to the final of our 4 graded stakes races on the card. That's the Pilgrim Stakes, the grade 2, going a mile and a 16th on the outer turf course. And I really racked my brain trying to beat the favorite here, Zulu Kingdom. But that horse just looked so good in the with anticipation for trainer Chad Brown. That was the first start in North America, too, after winning in debut in France. The horse can handle some softer ground. So if it is a little bit softer on Saturday, that won't be an issue. The horse had a dynamic turn of foot, looked really strong in that race, good tactical speed, does get Joel Rosario up on the mount after Flavian Pratt rode this horse last time out. I think this horse just kind of stands above the field a little bit and makes a ton of sense. 8-5. You're not getting much of a price. The horse is probably single worthy in this spot, which is, obviously a strong endorsement if you think the horse can be singled, but a tough one to get around as my top selection. Now, in terms of value, I think you could look a couple of places. I did take a look at the other Chad, which is always an interesting angle, early adopter with Manny Franco aboard. And that's a horse that won in debut and is training well coming out of that race. Has a far outside post, which is a little concerning, but it's a relatively modestly sized field, 8 horses. So should be able to get the right type of trip, though might be out a little bit wide. And the horse will need to take a step forward from a speed figure standpoint, is more of a grinder, I have a feeling. So we'll see. Even took a look at Smooth Breeze for Jorge Abreu, another one that I thought was a little bit interesting with Ricardo Santana Jr. up on the mount. Ultimately, though, where did I go for my top selection? And that was, or my value play, I should say, and that was Without Caution. This horse just had a bad trip last time out and just was not really kind of put in a very good position early, had some issues coming out of the gate. The debut was impressive, won that debut race, and over a couple of well-thought-of horses at the time, Helicity and Nudge, I should say, and the horse would manage to get up and win that day. Took a little bit of a step back, which is not all that uncommon with second-time starters. Now we get Kendrick Carmouche up, which is a little bit of a concern because this is now the third jockey in 3 starts. But at 8-1 for trainer Cherie DeVoe, I think this one could sit a little bit more of a forward trip. There's not a ton of speed in this race. Expect for a horse like Zulu Kingdom to be forward. I think Without Caution is going to be forward. I don't see many other horses that are, I don't in fact see really anybody, maybe Fully Authorized is going to send from the far outside, but that's probably it. And so I'd imagine that Zulu Kingdom and Without Caution are going to comfortably sit tracking trips. They should have everything, perfectly set up for them, turning for home, get the first crack at the leader. So Without Caution, 8-1, I think presents a little bit of value there in the Pilgrim. All right, well, let's head to the last race on the card, which is race 12, and it's a $20,000 maiden claimer going a mile on the main track for 3-year-olds and up. And for this one, going to the far outside, and the number 12 Guile for trainer Mike Maker with Manny Franco aboard. And listen, this horse has the races to run back to on the dirt. And it's as simple as that. You scratch out the 2 turf efforts and chuck those out, and you look at the last couple of dirt efforts, and they're solid. Now, he's taken a little bit of a class drop, going from maiden 40 down to a maiden 20, and that's a pretty significant class drop, I would argue. So 9-2, far outside. It's a big field, so it's essentially your second choice. But I think that one looks pretty tough in this particular spot. The horse has good attack, decent enough early speed. Manny should get this horse out. The outside post shouldn't be an issue. Should be able to kind of determine what the early pace scenario looks like and slot in at the appropriate spot. In terms of a value play, I'm throwing it downfield with this one. The number 7, Yingle Bells, 15-1 for trainer Gary Contessa. Why do I like this one? I think this horse might be lone speed in this race, actually. I know the number 4 Counterattack has some decent early speed, but I think Yingle Bells could be lone speed. And I think this is a horse getting the blinkers on, lone speed. Now, the question is, can we get the mile distance? Okay. Wasn't able to get 6.5 furlongs last time out, faded. So listen, I understand if you think this horse maybe is just nothing more than a rabbit, needs to be at 5.5 furlongs. The fact Contessa's putting this horse in at a mile, I think is a little bit interesting. Maybe it's just trying to find the right spot, in terms of a maiden claiming 20. Katie Davis up on the mount for a second time. Again, I'm going to take a little bit of a shot with this horse who finished third, admittedly a well-beaten third last time out to a horse like Conniving and Confabulation. Still, I think this horse at 15-1, maybe you include underneath in some of your tickets, but the blinkers on, could be lone speed, could control things up front, set whatever fractions she wants. And well, here's the other thing I know. Katie Davis is going to ride that horse through the wire and give that horse a good ride. And that's really all you can ask for as a player. So going to take that little bit of a shot with Yingle Bells as my value play in the last. All right, folks. Well, that does it for me and the Saturday card at Belmont at the Big A. Certainly hope you play on NYRA Bets. We have a lot of great promos, got a lot of great content. So make sure to subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube and check out everything we have up on the NYRA Bets app and nyrabets.com. Wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.